Hello and welcome to Meet the Writers. I'm Georgina Godwin. My guest today is a Palestinian author based in France mostly. Holding a doctoral degree in comparative literature from Paris Nanterre University, his works include a collection of short stories and novels. In English, his works appeared in the Paris Review, Strange Horizons, Words Without Borders and many more. His writings also featured in various art spaces, exhibitions and biennales, including the 58th Venice Biennale. His debut novel is The Palace on the Higher Hill, which tells the story of Faisal, who receives a mysterious letter about the death of an aunt he can't remember. He returns to the village of his birth in Palestine and to his family's deserted house, the Palace on the Higher Hill. The novel paints an intimate image of Palestine, where dreams and nightmares are in constant conflict. It's a deeply moving account of the tragedy of war and a display of home to new readers. And it's now translated into English from the French. The original version of the novel has won or been shortlisted for many awards. Karim Kattan, welcome to Meet the Writers.
Hi.
It's lovely to have you here. Now, you were born in Jerusalem in 1989. You grew up in Bethlehem. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how these places and experiences shaped your early life and perspective, both personally and as a writer.
I think the places we're from and we grew up in definitely shape the way we see the world. They inform how we look at the world that surrounds us, but also how we inhabit it. So I grew up in Bethlehem during the post-Oslo Accords era and during the Second Intifada. I was a teenager during the Second Intifada. So a lot of my life has been obviously a life under occupation where my mobility, my everyday mobility was extremely complicated and at times impossible. I think this specifically shaped the way I relate to stories as a mode that allows us to move throughout the world with freedom that I didn't have access to in my daily life. I think also as a Palestinian, when you write as a Palestinian and when you grow up in places like the West Bank, you're very acutely aware of vanishing, like the vanishing of a territory. You have settlements all around you that are growing by the day. You see this even as a child, although you don't necessarily understand it. You see things, sprawling around you. And I think also it gives you, perhaps, again, acute sense of the vanishing of things, even beyond the political vanishing, but also just the way things tend to vanish in the world. Yeah.
Tell me about your family background and how that influenced your development.
So I come from a Bethlehem family. We've been in Bethlehem for many centuries. We're very much rooted in Bethlehem. I do consider myself sometimes, I think, first and foremost, a person from Bethlehem. I'm very attached to that city where I grew up. I guess as you can hear, I come from a Palestinian family that speaks French. And so we've been quite close to the French-speaking world for a while. I was sent to the French school. And we're a Christian family, it so happens, which I mention not because it's any type of distinction, but because it also colors many of my novels and the way my characters approach their lives and the worlds around them. So that's basically what we were. So we've always been quite cosmopolitan. I'm lucky enough, I'm extremely lucky even, to have had access to books quite early, which is not a given ever, to books in many various languages, in a family that has had the chance to travel. My grandparents were merchants, so they traveled the world, and this also brought me, I think, a very precious access to worlds beyond Bethlehem and Palestine.
Is it unusual to be a Christian Palestinian?
No, it's not. I mean, it is the birthplace of Jesus. No, you have Christian families. You have a lot of them. Although, percentage-wise, it is, I think Christian families comprise maybe 2% of Palestinian population today. But no, it's not unusual. And I would like to point out also that there's no distinction that is made there. Palestinians are Palestinians regardless of their religion. Tellingly enough, they're treated with equal violence and contempt by the occupation.
Now, you left to study, you hold a doctorate in comparative literature. I wonder how that academic background and the study of literature influenced your creative writing process and also the themes that you explore. Can you learn to write in the way that you do?
Well, in fact, when I started the PhD, I was worried about the opposite. I was worried that writing my PhD would somehow dry up, I guess, my creative aspirations. What happened was the opposite. So I wrote The Palace on the Higher Hill as I was writing my PhD. And it provided a beautiful counterpoint. So whenever I was too taken into the academic language, I could take a break and just, imagine things. And then when I imagined too many things and I wanted to get back to very concrete, quantifiable things, I'd go back to the PhD. So it was a very enriching back and forth. I think my books tend to be, when you're a writer, you're a reader, first and foremost. I think you write because you love reading. So my books are very much influenced by a galaxy of books, of other books. They're informed by so many different books. And my PhD also, I think, my studies in literature generally gave me access to so many inspiring writers all around me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The Palace on the Higher Hill is your first novel, but you've also published a short story collection. And I wondered if you could really, I suppose, just unpick your journey as a writer, moving between short stories and novels, and how The Palace on the Higher Hill, this latest book, fits into your overall body of work.
Yeah, so in French, I also published another novel, After the Palace, which came out last year, and a collection of poetry, as well. I love experimenting in writing, so I love trying different things. I consider myself a novelist. That's my main practice. But I love, trying other types of writing. The Palace is my first novel. And, when you write a first novel, you're never really sure that you'll get another chance. You don't know if you will actually get to write a second novel. So I think what I did in The Palace, and I think what people often do in a first novel is they put everything in it. I wanted to make sure that maybe not all the things I wanted to say, but a lot of the things that were really working inside me at that moment were in The Palace. So it is a book that deals with a lot of different subjects because I had that chance to put it. And a novel is, even shorter novels tend to sprawl in a way that a short story doesn't. What I love about short stories is how dense they are. They're they're like a jewel. You have to work them perfectly well. Whereas a novel can perhaps, I don't know, maybe it can be more flawed. There's a beauty to flaws in a novel, I think. You have more space to explore. They're two different, modes of storytelling, which I both love, but differently.
And do you have to have a different mindset to flip between them?
Oh, yeah. I think when you start a novel, again, even if it's on the short end of novels, you're in there for a while. You're entering and creating a world that you will stay in. Whereas a short story, even if they take a long time, I sometimes spent months on short stories because they're intricate. You have this object. You have the object, it's a couple of pages, maybe it's 10 pages, maybe it's 15, and you work on it like again, I think I say a jewel because it's really it shines, there are so many aspects to it, and you have to make sure that every single aspect is perfectly patterned, which is also the case for novels, but again, differently because of length.
So this novel, The Palace on the High Hill, it's primarily set in the fictional village of Jabalayan. It focuses intensely on the house, or the palace on the higher hill, as the title suggests. The setting feels almost like a character itself. It's deeply intertwined with family history and the narrator's state of mind. Tell us what inspired that particular setting and how you conceive of the house's role within that narrative.
Well, actually, one of the first versions of The Palace, one of the first drafts that I wrote, the narrator was the house itself. So the house told the story. Eventually, I discarded this because I really wanted the main character to speak. But I think it goes to show how important the house was to me, and space in general. I think, houses tend to hold the ghosts, our family ghosts, but also our memories, our grief, our happiness, all of that. And a lot of the palace is about, I think, how this palace tend to emanate all these things that they hold. So it was one of the first things that I conceived, even before having a plot or an idea where the story itself would go. I had a very distinct image of this absurd palace. It's an absolutely absurd palace. So I knew what it looked like. It's inspired by many different places in Palestine. You can't pinpoint a single reality that informed the palace, but it's a lot of different things. But I knew what it looked like. I knew how I wanted it to feel. It's a haunted house. It's part Gothic, part traditional Palestinian houses. It's all these things at the same time. I knew that. I started from that.
And it's told, as you say, not now from the house's point of view, but from a distinct first-person perspective, from Faisal's perspective. And he often addresses somebody called George. He struggles with memory, forgetting, this sense of dislocation. I wondered, from writing in the first person, which is very intimate, what made you choose that to give it this kind of disorientative structure?
It was a struggle until the end of writing the first person. I kept switching back to third. And because, yes, there's something very intimate about the first person. And so I kept going back and forth. But I knew I wanted Faisal to speak. So in the end, I did choose the first person. I guess when you write novels, you're also very much interested in how we tell stories, why we tell them, and how we build them as we speak our stories. And one of the things that I think that I do at least, is that I just go back and forth. I never, I don't have a story that springs forth fully formed from my mind and mouth. And I wanted that to also be available there to the reader. The fact that Faisal doesn't know where he wants to start the story. He actually doesn't know what he wants to tell George. Exactly.
And we keep coming back to that in the text, don't we? You keep writing. Oh no, I'm not going to start there. I'm going to start here.
Yeah. Oh no, I didn't want to talk about that. I wanted to talk about that. Oh no, I did not want to talk about that. It also shows Faisal's confusion, of course, as a character who's slowly maybe losing a bit of his grip on reality. And I think it also shows a fundamental confusion that we can feel as Palestinians as we live in a dislocated territory, and in a territory that is defined a lot by apartheid and occupation, and it does things also to the way you tell your stories and to the way you relate to past, present and future. It dislocates these things. And I wanted that dislocation to shine through in a way in Faisal's speech itself.
So Nawal, who's the narrator's grandmother, Ayub, I think she's referred to, a very powerful and complex figure in the book, who seems to be rooted in history, fiercely protective of the house and of the land. I wonder how you developed her character and what she represents in contrast or in relation to Faisal.
I think one of the main questions of the novel is how we relate differently to the political and to politics. Where Faisal is arguably maybe nihilistic, or at least refuses the politics of Palestine, like he just wants to be left alone, basically, to free himself from the yoke of politics. His grandmother, Nawal, represents a more maybe traditional relationship to land and armed resistance, and they discuss these things constantly. They're both right and wrong about everything, as people are. And so I wanted these two very different but very real relationships to politics in Palestine to come into dialogue and see what comes out of this. They also represent two generational realities, I think. I do have to point out that, so we're talking about the Palace on the Higher Hill, the translation that came out at Foundry Edition this year. The Palace came out in 2021 in a different political moment and in a different historical moment.
Would you have changed it?
I don't think I would have changed it. I just think Palestinian writing will never be the same ever again, and therefore I think we will organically write something else. It doesn't mean that what we wrote before is over or obsolete, but it speaks to a moment. It speaks to a very specific kind of anxiety that you could feel, that you still feel as a Palestinian, but that you could feel back then. A lot of the things I describe in the palace, there's this invasion of settlers throughout the West Bank. I describe it as science fiction, like it's a hyperbole of what used to happen in the 2010s. Now this hyperbole is real life,
It's interesting you talked about the generational divide. Yeah. How does that manifest itself within Palestine?
I mean, Palestinians, like all people, are not a monolith, so people disagree a lot, and we tend to disagree a lot with different generations, Also, Palestine as this country has shifted so much over the years in terms even just of what the territory is, that according to when you were born, you didn't actually grow up in the same country. The example I often use is the difference between my brother and myself. My brother is 12 years older than I am. He didn't grow up in the same country. Although he grew up in a country where he could move, for example, much more freely than I did. So necessarily, even though we tend to agree politically, our politics are informed by two totally different relationships to what the land is. It's very crucial also for Nawal, because Nawal is a person who knew Palestine before the Nakba and 48. So obviously, which is something she tells Faisal a lot, is like, you don't know the country, I know.
Yeah, so it can be completely different depending on who you are, absolutely. And the narrator reflects on dispossession and the idea that Palestinian identity is just being erased or turned into history for a museum. So just bringing it right up to date, I wonder how you see the current political and social reality in Palestine informing the fictional world of this novel. As you say, though, of course, it was written before this current part of the conflict.
So I've been touring with the novel in English, and I've done readings, and sometimes some of the excerpts I read feel to me very uncanny, because they speak to things that we as Palestinians are going through right now. As, there's an ongoing genocide, there's the annexation of the West Bank, like everything is in such a state. And it's already there in the novel. It's not that I'm particularly visionary, it's just that anyone who had been in the West Bank for just a couple of weeks could have partly guessed in general where we were going. And my anxiety as a Palestinian let's say, when I wrote the book 2018 or 19 about vanishing, wasn't misplaced. The signs that more violence was coming our way or was going to be unleashed were there. And this is something I realize now as I have to look back on what I wrote back then.
So Faisal, the narrator, expresses this very complex relationship with his homeland. He sometimes says Palestine is a curse or a source of burden, while at other times acknowledging its beauty, its significance. I wonder, firstly, for you on a personal level, what your relationship with it is, but also how the novel navigates these seemingly contradictory feelings of despair and attachment to the land.
Yeah. I think even beyond Palestinians, we always have these very complicated and vivid relationships to belonging, to where we belong, to where we think we come from, to our parents. We always have these relationships of attachment and refusal, which constitute the way we relate to how we belong. In the case of Palestine, of course, it's multiplied by 100. I'm personally very attached to Palestine and to Bethlehem. It is a place I love being in. I hope eventually to be able to live in again. But I'm also very much aware of how is thrust upon us the importance of nationalism, because we don't have a nation. We have a nation, but we don't have a state. We don't have freedom. We don't have justice. So it is we constantly think about that because we don't have access to it. So it is the thing that we have this responsibility towards. But also sometimes people just want to live normal lives, without thinking about justice all the time. And I think there's a tension there that everyone feels and that I was interested in. Again, back then, it still is the case today, but today things are the magnitude is so different that I think I would answer your question differently as Karim today than I do as Karim in 2021, let's say.
It's so interesting. And I guess it's not just you. We're talking about most Palestinians.
Yeah. And I think we're also talking about something that even goes beyond Palestinians in many ways. Again, how we relate to what we consider to be our nation, or how we relate to what we think our identities are. And sometimes we're very attached to them, and sometimes on the other hand we want to be emancipated from them. And this constant tension is something that you get to explore in a novel in a way that I think you can't. You can, but differently in an essay or other forms.
Absolutely. The book builds towards a very tense climax as forces close in on the house. And the ending sees, and I'm no spoilers here, but the ending sees the narrator making significant, maybe ambiguous choices in the face of the threat without revealing too much. I wonder if you can discuss the meaning behind the narrator's actions and the final moments of the book.
So I'll answer your question without answering it. I'm just thinking about how I should do that. Something very significant happens at the end of the novel. Not only the decisions that Faisal makes, but also who is telling the story. There's a shift at the end of the story that's very important to me in terms of who takes the place of being the storyteller. I think that it's extremely ambiguous. The story ends in types of violence that are either political or they're not, basically. And I didn't want this to be resolved. I didn't want to resolve whether this violence had deep political meaning or it was completely a way of reveling in gratuitous violence. It's very hard to answer your question without saying what I'm talking about. But I would like to point out that also the fact that there's a shift in who is narrating the story at the end, for me, is also the sort of the crux of the story happens as we shift from one speaker to another.
And in a way that reflects what you were saying about yourself. The Karim of today is not the Karim of 3 years ago, I suppose.
Yeah, we change and things change, and this is also what I love, really deeply love about novels, is that I don't know if they're timeless, but at least they operate under a different timeline than we do, and they change as times change, and they can address their moments in different ways. They're not like a novel is not an op-ed, so it can have a lot of contradiction in itself. It can say one thing and the other. A novel can lie. It can be bad. You get to do all these things in a novel, and you get to explore how contradictory as a people, as individuals, as a species, we are. And I think this violence that courses through the novel is also about that, about all these contradictions that we sort of wrestle with as humans, even not only as Palestinians.
So it was originally written in French, as we know. It's been translated into English by Jeffrey Zuckerman. Firstly, why? Your English is obviously excellent. And secondly, I wonder if you could tell us about the experience of writing about Palestine in French,
sure,
and then the process of having your work translated and reaching now an English-speaking audience.
Sure. So I'm very lucky that Foundry Editions wanted to publish The Palace on the Higher Hill, and that Jeffrey did the translation because he's an incredibly talented translator, and this is an incredible publishing house. I couldn't translate my own book for sure anyway.
Why not?
It's a skill. It's a very specific skill, translation, which I possibly can do for others, or to French perhaps. But it's a skill in itself, and I think I would have done a terrible job at that. But Jeffrey was very open to exchange and to feedback. He wanted feedback on the text, so we talked a lot. I got to read a few of the drafts. It was great for me to be able to exchange about what he was doing, all the while acknowledging that the translation is his also. It's an interesting experience in letting go also for a writer. Like, this is mine, but also not really mine, and it lives a life of its own. To your question about French, so Palestinians speak Arabic, obviously, and when they speak a foreign language, it will be mostly English. There's not a lot of French speakers in Palestine. So there's not a lot of French-speaking Palestinian writers of fiction. There's 2 of us. I keep saying that, but there's literally, I think, 2, well, maybe 3 or 4. But so when you write in French, you're not being read by a lot of Palestinians. Funnily enough, now that the book is in English, it's accessible. It's much more accessible to Palestinians. So this is the first time that my book is being read by a lot of Palestinians I know. So that's an interesting transition.
What's the reaction been?
It's still new, but at least the people I know like it. But they're also the people I know. So,
Yeah. Finally, I just wanted to ask you. You're mostly based in France now.
Yeah.
Where are your family, and where is home?
Oh God, that's a tough one. So my family is in Bethlehem. Everyone's in Bethlehem. Well, I have some family elsewhere, but yeah, we are based in Bethlehem. Although things are so hard that I don't know. I hope we get to stay there. Home is, I don't know. Home is in the book. Bethlehem is home. It still is home. Paris is also home. It's the home of my adult life, I think. And everything in between is home. I think, yeah, the in-between is home. I feel very much at home. I know this sounds very corny, but I mean it. But I feel at home in writing, for sure.
Thank you so much, Karim. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Karim Kattan there, and The Palace on the Higher Hill is translated by Jeffrey Zuckerman, and it's published by Foundry Editions. It's out now. You've been listening to Meet the Writers, thanks to the production team of Steph Chungu and Francesca Jilks. And you can download this show and previous episodes from our website or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Georgina Godwin. Thank you for listening.